Welcome back. I'm George Knapp. This is Coast to Coast AM. Let's say a totalitarian government comes to power and starts building concentration camps. There are those who think that that's already underway on this continent. You see the handwriting on the wall in big bloody letters, and you decide it's time for you and your family to get out. Where would you go? How would you decide what the safest harbor would be? What criteria would you use to make that decision? My first guest tonight has spent years putting together a case for where we should go if it all hit the fan, whether it was political or natural, war, disease, economic collapse, any number of scenarios. Blake Sawyer is a writer, health educator, and businessman who has already taken steps to set up a second home in what he considers the safest place on the planet should things go bad in a hurry, and we'll find out what that place is. Blake, thanks for being with us on the program.
Hey, George. It's great to be with you. I'm really excited about tonight.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun. Tell me this, a little bit about you personally. How long have you been at this, and do you have any particular expertise to qualify you as an authority on what are some pretty complicated topics?
That's a really good question. I guess talking about myself is something that I hate to do. We'll get into the meat of this later on, and that's what I really love to talk about, really helping people. I don't think I'm qualified other than just being a researcher. I have researched for over 30 years this particular subject, and I've spent a ton of money traveling all over the world and researching, but I think I'm just an ordinary person that I had an epiphany about 35 years ago that changed my life, the way that I look at things, and things started coming together. So I don't have a PhD, I don't have a doctorate, but I'm a researcher, and I've been involved in a lot of best-selling books and have put things together for people that have made a difference in people's lives. So once I dedicated my life, when I had a second chance on life, to helping people, man, it's really happened.
I have seen the website. You gave me the code, and I got on there. I know there's a lot of stuff packed onto those pages. We'll talk about a lot of it. Let's start with the tipping point. What could happen to make a move of this kind necessary? Give me the range of possibilities. I mean, you discuss a whole bunch of them. Political, totalitarian, oppressive government. Which one seems more pressing to you?
I think that I want to give a little bit of a background here, if I can, about this, where I've come from. I think coast-to-coast listeners are pretty intelligent. You've already laid the groundwork. You've already had a plethora of people on coast-to-coast that have given scenarios already, possibilities. I mean, just this week on Thursday, Mark Dice was on. Talk about totalitarian state, I mean, being tracked and traced, et cetera. I think that there's two sides of this coin, and in all the people that I've talked to, the bajillions of people that I've talked to, it really is two sides, George. The United States, to me, already is too bad of a place to live in. Now, most people think, no, that's not the case. But I think we are the proverbial frog that was put in cold water, and now it's boiling, and we all think we're in a hot tub. And we're in a hot tub in Vegas, and everything is just peachy keen and copacetic. I think there's massive deception in this country about really how bad it already is. But yes, I think there's some things that are going to be coming down the pike, and it's coming down the pike because of this 35 years of research that I've done. I've put the pieces of the puzzle together. I've looked and listened to the people that don't have an agenda, but that really are able to give what's really going on in the world today. And I really do believe that there's a cabal of people, and we won't name names, but there are people out there that really can pull the strings. George, I think there's a lot of people that want to, power-hungry people that want to, but there is a group that is able to pull it off. And my greatest concern right now is these people, because of their belief in eugenics, want to reduce the world's population by 90%. They say it, they quote it, they're not shy about it. We have the quotes on the website. I provide all the documentation that they're implementing it and how they're doing it. So there's a lot of scenarios that can come down the pike. I mean, just a bunch, as you've mentioned. I mean, martial law. If Obama wants to sign martial law into effect tomorrow, it can be done. It's just a signature. But there's a lot of things that could potentially happen. I mean, another Chernobyl, Fukushima type event, world war. I mean, look at what's going on in the Middle East right now with Israel. Things could get out of hand. We know that there's going to be tit for tat. There's countries that are raising their ugly head against each other, and they're fighting, and Russia's threatening, China's threatening. Russia said don't go into Syria to the United States, and so the world powers are kind of at a very tense edge right now. I think everybody knows that the economy of the United States is in deep, deep doo-doo. Anybody that looks at any graphs knows that it wasn't too long ago we were the greatest creditor nation on earth. We had more money than everybody. Now we're the greatest debtor nation on earth. We have more debt than 90% of the countries in the world combined. The economy could collapse. We could get into hyperinflation. There could be a pandemic. We came close last year to potentially having one where everybody has to be forced to be vaccinated. There's going to be people that don't want to be vaccinated. There's just a lot of things that can happen. We could have a natural disaster. Yellowstone could go. I really personally believe that there's going to be a lot of earth changes that are going to be taking place, gravitational pulls and things, and we're going to have greater earthquakes, greater weather anomalies, things like that. So there's a plethora of things that can possibly happen, George.
So I guess the tricky part would be deciding when to go. You said in that soliloquy there that it's already beyond the tipping point, that now it's time to go?
I believe it is, and I believe it is because of all the people that I've already helped, the bajillions of people that have already left the United States and expatriated out of the United States, and then I already know that there are already millions of people that have left the country, not necessarily because they've read my website and looked at my information, but because of taxation, because of other things. But probably, George, this is the other side of the coin that a lot of people don't look at. Do we have to wait till it's so bad that we don't want to live here anymore? Or do we look at it that there is somewhere or places, plural, on this planet that have a lot more freedom, they're tranquil, they're peaceful, they're real, they're just a better place to live? One of the things is that every single person that are listening to you and I right now, every single person, unless they're a Native American or they're a descendant of a slave, their ancestors, their relatives, left the country of their birth and came to the United States. Now, not all of them came fleeing King George in England or war or something absolutely horrible. Some of them just came for a better way of life. They weren't fleeing inevitable death, but some people, like the potato famine in Ireland, we got a huge amount of Irish immigrants because it was so bad in Ireland. There was starvation. It was happening. So everybody listening to my voice, your ancestors left the country of their birth. And sometimes, George, I mean, they left their families, relatives. They left, in Nazi Germany, they left the grand piano, the trophies, the this, the that. I mean, every possession they had and whatever they could carry on their back, they got out before the Nazis came forward and took over, almost all of Europe.
Let's talk about a couple of the specifics, though. I mentioned about totalitarianism, and you said, look, the president could sign the country into martial law tomorrow. How likely do you think that is? And I reference it in this context. On your website, on the links, you have some references to articles about Halliburton, for example, getting a great big fat several $100 million contract to build, in essence, concentration camps.
Well, I happen to believe that there's going to be debtors' prisons, concentration camps, re-education centers, all those sorts of things. And what I tell people is this. Now, look, Stalin didn't build all those gulags to sit empty. Hitler didn't build all those concentration camps to sit empty. They were full to capacity. You don't spend that amount of time, energy, and effort building these things and let them sit empty. You know that you're going to fill them up, okay? Now, I don't want to go to concentration camp, neither do you. You're too intelligent, right? You don't want to end up in prison. There's just a lot of bad stuff that happens there, okay? But I don't think it necessarily has to be we're at that stage where they're rounding people up. I say on my website and in my blog, I've written several hundred blogs, I constantly report to people for every one person that left, or you can say fled Europe, on the march of the Nazis all the way across Europe, 21 people stayed behind and died. Now, not everybody died in concentration camps. They could have died of starvation. They could have died by actually thinking they were going to amalgamate into the Nazi system. They'd join the SS, the Gestapo, or whatever, thinking that they would rise to power and they would be okay in this system. And yet they died, either because they were sent to the front lines or because of the war itself. So I don't think just going to the concentration camps is the only concern that we have here. I do think that they know, the people that we will go nameless, they do know that the world is coming to an apex, that there's going to be an economic collapse. We have rioting in the streets in Athens. I'll be in Athens here in a couple of weeks. We have rioting in the streets all over the world in first world countries, in civilized countries, because of the economic crises, because of a lot of different things. There's a breaking point for humanity, and we're seeing it all over the world as countries are being overthrown. It's just not the Middle East. It's not North Africa. I mean, there's some things that are going on all over the world. And we have this mindset in the United States. It can't happen here. Oh, my. I really struggle with people think that it can't happen here.
Well, I have trouble with the totalitarianism concentration camp part of it, only because, we heard those kinds of allegations made during the Bush administrations, and we were hearing them now. I don't put it beyond possibility it could happen, that you'd end up having a lot of roundups and civil disobedience and things of that sort. I just, like you mentioned, it's hard to buy that could happen in our country.
I think when it gets to a certain point, it can happen. If a pandemic happens and there's people are forced vaccinated, how many people are going to say no to the vaccine? Okay?
Right.
I happen to have lived in the hill country of Texas for the last 10 years of my life, and I have friends both in both spectrums, from the left to the right, etc. And there are people that are just itching for this thing to happen, okay? Whether it's, what do you want to call it, civil war or the collapse of civilization in the United States, so they can take the country back. There's a lot of people that see this happening. They sense it's going to happen, and I believe that it doesn't necessarily have to happen that way. It could happen with like I said, Yellowstone. If Yellowstone goes, or some natural disaster, or some total economic collapse. I tell people, research Detroit, Michigan right now. Look at what's happened in Detroit with 30% or more unemployment. 100 square miles of empty houses. The mayor of Detroit wants to bulldoze, 10,000, 15, 20,000 homes because they're just completely vacated. When we have 20, 30% unemployment in this country, we could have a big problem on our hands that the government will want to deal with in a way that we're going to freak out over, I think.
You mentioned Detroit, which brings me to one of the topics I was surprised to see on your site, and it deals with crime. Crime is bad. It's endemic in every American city and town. It's not the kind of thing you think of as so bad that you would want to leave the country, I guess.
Well, that goes to the other side of the coin. The particular country that I have my other home in has a nominal amount of crime compared to the United States. One of the concerns that I think that most Americans should have, and as I write about it intently on my website, is this. In the entire world, 7 billion people on the planet, there's about 9 million people in prisons. 25% of those people are in the United States. The United States is 4.3% of the world's population, yet 25% of all the people in prisons are in the United States. Now, 4.3% of the population, but 25% of all the people in the world in prison are in the United States. That has never happened before except in Stalinist Russia, Hitler's Europe, Pol Pot, Cambodia, etc. There should be some concern about this. And you mentioned crime, George. Well, you would think with those statistics, the highest incarceration rate in the world, 50% of all the countries in the world have 1/10 the amount of incarceration rate that the United States has. You'd think all of our criminals would be off the streets and they would be in prison. That's not so. The United States ranks as the highest crime country, violent crime country, which is murder, rape, and armed robbery in the world. Now, there's 3 or 4 or 5 countries that have higher murder rates than we do. We're number 1 in the world in rape, and we're number 1, number 2 in the world in armed robbery. There's crime here. You can go places in the world where you don't have to worry about crime. If you worry about crime, it's like maybe having your stereo stolen out of your vehicle. Would you rather be raped, or would you rather have a vehicle stolen out of your stereo stolen out of your vehicle? Would you rather be murdered, or would you rather have your home burglarized? When it comes to violent crime, Americans don't realize we're number 1 in the entire world.
You make the point that anything when you get over 3% of your population that's incarcerated, there's something wrong. There's something wrong with the country, and we're at 4.3.
Yes, and history history is something we should learn from, or else it's going to repeat itself. And I'm just providing the statistics and the facts. George, what I've done for 35 years is it's sort of like doing a jigsaw puzzle. Now, you and I are about the same age. We're in our late 50s. Back in those days, in the 50s and 60s, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have a lot of things that people have today. We did jigsaw puzzles. And to do a jigsaw puzzle, you just dump everything out of the box and you turn everything upright so you can see that. And then you start finding the flat edges. And I used to do a lot of jigsaw puzzles, and I could do them really, really quick. There was a challenge that I had is to do a jigsaw puzzle without looking at the box. Say the box was a barn with a little pond and two people there and the blue sky and the white clouds, etc. Well, looking at the box, you could pick up a piece and put things in. This whole thing that I've been doing is like doing a jigsaw puzzle. I'm putting pieces in and seeing the picture of the future of the United States, the future of the world, based upon all the facts and the information that have been given to me. And in the process of doing this, I began having these thoughts in my mind. Well, this is probably going to happen, and that's going to probably happen. And when those things did, as I saw the picture clear, I didn't think of myself as a prophet in the way that people think of prophets today, like a religious prophet or even Nostradamus and quatrains and all this sort of stuff. I just thought, man, I'm putting things together, and I can see into the future by just having a huge amount of information. The way that I've always described is like a weatherman. A weatherman can predict, let's say you're in Vegas. They can say 3 days from now, we're going to have severe weather outbreak because this warm front with this moist air is going to meet with this cold front, etc. 72 hours later, if you're standing in Vegas and it's perfectly sunny and 70 degrees and nothing even looks like it could potentially be bad, he's predicting the future. And I think that we all can look into the future a bit by looking at all the pieces of the puzzle, putting as many in as we possibly can, and we can see the future. We really can see into the future.
All right. Blake Sawyer is my guest, talking about where you would go if you needed to escape the USA. Little Feat takes us into the break. We'll be back with more on Coast to Coast AM. And if my guest, Blake Sawyer, is correct, we could all do with a little traveling sometime soon. If things were to hit the fan, where would you go? When we come back, we'll get into the list of some of the suggestions, places that he think would be safe, whether it's an economic, a natural, or a man-made disaster coming our way. That and more right after this on Coast to Coast AM. My guest is Blake Sawyer. Blake, I want to talk for a moment about your website and this special link you put together for Coast listeners. But I want to address something that's been raised by a couple of the listeners who've emailed me prior to you coming on the program. They tried to look at your website after seeing your name being promoted for this appearance, and there's almost nothing they can see unless they want to subscribe. So, at Coast to Coast, we are very happy when our guests sell some books or DVDs. We're very much in favor of free enterprise, but you can understand why some might approach this with trepidation if they try to click on this and they have no idea what they get for their money. So why don't you tell us about the website and let people know what they're going to get?
Okay. That's absolutely fair. George, I've spent 35 years doing this research, hundreds of thousands of dollars, traveled all over the world. The website basically is every country in the world, 200 countries in the world, rated in 100 survival categories. And every country, from the best survival country in the world all the way to the 200th, is rated in there. And I really put a bunch of information. I've never had anybody that have gone to this website that has ever complained, never had anybody say anything negative about it, and the vast majority of people go, oh, my God, it's just, the most unbelievable information. To me, it's insurance. It's more than insurance. I bet everybody listening to my voice right now knows there's, in the back of their mind, they might not want to think about it, but they know there's something innately wrong that's going on in the United States and in the world. And what they don't want to have is no choices. Just like in Germany or all of Europe, there were rumors about what was going on. There were people going, I'll never leave my home, my family, etc. But it got to be a point in time where it got so bad that it was life and death. It was a choice of life and death. And people that waited too long, they got caught behind the lines. Paper, please. Well, you don't have your papers, you never got out. the information that's on this site is voluminous. It's huge. I think there's over 350 pages of information. I've written over 300 blogs in the last couple of years, and I keep current information in the hands of people that want to know where are the safe places in the world that you can go to, and how you do it, the immigration information. I don't think that asking the amount of money that I asked for this site, in fact, I knocked it down by 70% just for coast-to-coast listeners to make it available to people. I don't think anybody could possibly look at this information and say, wow, I didn't get 10 times worth my money. And the reason is we all have some sort of insurance, whether it's insurance for our automobile just in case we're in a car accident, or we might have, let's say, candles and a flashlight in the house just in case electricity goes off. But it may never go off, but we still have them. We might have a gun in the house to protect our wife and children and daughter from being raped or an intruder or something like that. We might have freeze-dried food just in case martial law is called or something goes bad at the grocery store, right? We have insurance. Well, this information is truly life and death. Maybe people would get this information and they would never use it, just like buying a cookbook and never actually making one of the recipes. I think most people have done something like that. But if this is the most important information when it comes to life and death, when it comes to surviving what I call the next 5 to 15 years on this planet. You have a lot of shows on 2012 and a lot of things that are coming down in a prophetic sort of way. All the world's religions, all of them, I've studied them in depth, have a sort of what we'll call an end-time scenario, George. And almost all of them have very similar bloodbath, massive amount of death on the planet scenarios before the Messiah returns, or the Imam Mahdi, which is just in an uproar over in Iran right now, or the Lord Maitreya and the fifth Buddha, Christ coming back, Jesus coming back, the Messiah coming back for the Jews. All these scenarios are coming into play here, and there are the potential for war, the potential for disease epidemics, the potential for famine and starvation, and huge amount of natural disasters, and ruthless governments taking away our freedoms and our right to have let's say, a high quality of life. And I think that this information gives people what they would know in the back of their mind. I know where I'd need to go. I know why I'd want to go there.
Well, I would say I spent a lot of time on the site today navigating it and getting a feel for it to prepare for the interview, and there is a heck of a lot of information. I didn't scratch the surface of it, but I did see a lot of really interesting stuff. I'm not telling people whether to buy it or not, but there's no shortage of material there. Let me ask you this. You touched on it a little bit. There are a lot of people in this country who have prepared for something exactly like this. They've got a cabin somewhere. They've got stores of food, as you mentioned, freeze-dried stuff. They've stocked up on ammo. You mentioned that for every one that left to the U.S., 21 died somewhere else. There's a heck of a lot of people who would want to stay put, who would want to hunker down, who almost look forward to something like this happening.
Right. For every one person that left Europe, 21 stayed put and died in World War II. Right. 79 million people died in World War II. You're absolutely right. I know a lot of people that are hunkering down, but this is my mindset, and I know this. I don't want to come across any way, shape, or form, George, as being arrogant, but this is what I believe. Let's say we're on the Titanic. We've been given this unbelievable spiel about this ship, okay? I mean, there's nothing in the world that's ever been built like it, etc. It's unsinkable. It's this, it's that, the other. The moment it hits the iceberg, there's probably only a few people on the entire Titanic that really know what's going to happen in the next few hours. They know for sure, 100% sure, that it's going to be at the bottom of the North Atlantic, deep, deep down there. Now, we've heard this story about, people rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. If you and I were two people that were, let's say, nautical engineers and knew for sure that the Titanic was going down. We have hindsight because we know the Titanic. But if we knew for sure, all the people saying, let's go bail water, let's take a boat, let's just wait and see. We gotta protect the Titanic. I mean, this is the Titanic. It's not going down. I mean, this is too big to go down, right? We gotta save the Titanic. All these sorts of things. We're going, you bet you don't understand. We have X amount of minutes. We got to get people in the lifeboats. We got to get off of this ship. It's going down. And we could have people looking at us and going, you're abandoning ship? You're a chicken. You're yellow. You're a coward. You can't. They told us it can't possibly sink. And you're going, but I know for a fact it is. Now, 35 years of research. I've researched so much. I really do believe that the United States has been targeted by the globalists to be taken out, George. They just have. The United States, as much as I love the United States and as much as I have a huge amount of feelings for the United States, we're right now the big bully on the playground. We can kick sand in anybody's face. We can kick any of the kids off of the swing set that are smaller than us, etc. But to have a global governance, a new world order, to have the type of system they want in the world, you can't have one big, huge bully going around invading countries and assassinating people and killing people. You have to have this equal group of nations. I believe the United States is targeted, and I believe exactly what these people that do control the economies and global events in the world, they have targeted the United States for destruction. I'm absolutely convinced of it. And so I believe that you can hunker down here if you want to, and there will be a few people that will survive. But I believe, and I've written about this on the website, and I provide the documentation, I think, 90% of the people in the United States that are alive today that stay here will be dead in the next 5 to 15 years. I absolutely am convinced of it. Okay?
Let's put it this way. If there was a full-out nuclear war, which you describe, you talk about that on the website. If there was something like, as you mentioned earlier in the program, Yellowstone blows, what difference does it make where you are? I mean, those kind of events are planetary, aren't they?
No, they're not. And this is something that I think our listeners will be really excited to gather information and hear about this. Well, let's take the planet that we live on and really do look at it. Let me give you some absolute flat-out statistics. No, these are not opinions. This isn't like George Knapp likes jazz and I like rock, and you like blue and I like red, and you like Chinese food and I like Italian. That's opinions. Those are tastes. This is absolute fact. 90% of the world's population lives in the northern hemisphere. 10% of the world's population lives in the southern hemisphere. 95% of all the pollution generated in the world is generated in the northern hemisphere and does not cross the equator. That's called the Coriolis effect. All the air and all the water, I mean, like we're talking 99%, stays in its perspective hemisphere. It does not cross the hemisphere. Think about it. 5% of the world's pollution is in the southern hemisphere, but it's half of the planet. 85% of the world's rain forests that clean the air, that provide oxygen, are in the southern hemisphere. It's only happened to clean out 5% of the world's pollution.
Well, I guess that goes a long way toward pointing to what's at the top of your list. And,
absolutely. Let me just mention a couple of things.
Sure.
The climates in the northern hemisphere are much more severe than the southern hemisphere. Any global climate change, I have all the stats, the graphs on the website. In the southern hemisphere, global climate change doesn't change much of anything. Severe changes in the northern hemisphere. There is so many people in the northern hemisphere. There are tensions, war. There's fighting over the few resources. It is completely different. In the southern hemisphere, it is quiet, tranquil, peaceful, other than a few places in southern Africa. It is a completely different way of life. And if you have another Fukushima or you have a nuclear war, all that is going to generate in the northern hemisphere. None of that. Radiation, those isotopes, whether it's iodine-131 or uranium or plutonium or strontium, none of that crosses the equator and goes to the southern hemisphere. So if there's nuclear war between the United States and China, the United States and Russia, or Pakistan, things start getting out of hand, Pakistan, India, whatever, all that's going to circulate in the northern hemisphere. Okay?
Okay. Well, I don't know if an all-out nuclear war, whether there's much left anywhere, but I would agree with you. Probably it's going to be better in the southern hemisphere. So let's talk about you. Now, you've put your money where your mouth is. It's not just talk. You have a second home. You have a getaway, and it's in the place that's at the top of your list. I won't give away the whole thing, but we need to at least give them some meat here. Let's talk about the number one on the list and what the analysis is.
Well, 15 years ago, I moved my wife and my two children to this country in this particular area because it was based upon all the information that I put together. And this is the other side of the coin, George, that we've talked about. It is so much better than the United States by 1,000 different ways. I mean, I cannot begin to tell you how much a different lifestyle it is to live in an area that's peaceful. The country that I have a home in, I don't own a home in the United States. I could certainly afford to have one with my health business and stuff. I certainly could afford to have a very, very nice home in the United States, but I choose not to. I choose not to put my money and my time and my energy effort into developing things in the United States. I have in my safe haven country. But it is in the southern hemisphere. It's in the southern part of the southern hemisphere, and it is in South America. The whole bottom part of the southern part of South America, which would be Uruguay, Chile, and Argentina, are in the top 5 of the countries for survivability. But there's more to it than just southern hemisphere. I mean, there are these 100 categories of survivability. There's so much information that we couldn't possibly talk about it in 2 hours, let alone the time frame that we have.
You rank them, though. You rank all the 200 countries and based on the various categories.
Right. I think it would be a disservice if I said, go to country ABC. And I'll tell you why. To me, and I've heard this from a lot of people, it'd be like getting one of those bookcases or some piece of furniture that you have to kind of put together and it have instructions. There, in my website, there are so much information. There's just a plethora of information that tells you how to get there, immigration, why. I have this best of and worst of series. I have people, if you're really into one particular subject, let's say you're scared to death of getting bit by a mosquito and dying of malaria. Well, I put all those countries in there that have diseases like malaria, etc. If you want the most money, or you have very little money and you want the best bang for your buck, I give you the poor countries that have survivability where you can go and live a very good quality of life. I list all these different things and give you the ability to choose based upon your personal choice, but they're safe against what I call the 5 big killers: war, disease, famine, starvation, natural disasters, and I call it ruthless governments. You know, think Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot, Idi Amin, Mugabe, all that sort of stuff. I believe that of all the deaths that are going to take place in the next 5 to 15 years, it's going to be because of these 5 things: war, disease, famine, natural disasters, and ruthless governments. And there are places where the country that I've moved to, I'm predicting less than 4% of the world's 4% of that population will die. But the vast majority of the countries are going to be 50, 70, 90, 100%. I believe in this collapse of civilization and with war and all the other things that are going to take place.
You mentioned, the top 5, and 3 of the top 5, Argentina, Chile, and Ecuador. Can you even get into those countries, though? Do they let people in? Can an American, for example, move there? Not only will they let us in, but will the USA let us out? You mentioned on your website, for example, how much tougher it is to get a passport these days.
Right. Well, I mentioned that that's an amazing thing is what they're doing with the passports. Yes, there are some countries that are easier to get into than others. There's still a few countries that are not so overwhelmed in their immigration offices by Americans and Europeans. But let me tell you, millions of Europeans and millions of Americans are moving to these countries, and they are overwhelming the immigration offices. So they're going to make it more difficult as the day goes by, as every week goes by, to be able to have Americans get in. I think that you have to look at it as there's the information on the website. You can look at the ones. I have immigration information for the top 5. Ecuador, I've just recently helped a family move to Ecuador with 5 kids. It's an incredible place. There's a lot of people that are moving to Ecuador for various reasons now. It's directly on the equator. It is in the top 5, but all the countries are in the southern hemisphere. They're almost all of them are in the top 20. There's a few countries that are in the northern hemisphere, but it's difficult to get into some countries. Look at Australia and New Zealand. You have to have a lot of money. You have to speak English. You have to be young, yet you have to have spent your whole career in the same business. It's a point system. And and I give the details about getting into certain countries and how difficult it is or how easy it is. There's no easy country to move into, George. I mean, if you and I had, let's say, if you and I owned a country, just you and me, would we just let anybody in? No, of course not. Would we let all the criminals in? No, of course not. We want educated people, people that aren't going to leech off of the government, et cetera. So there's things that you have to do, but I've done it. I've helped a bajillion people do it. It's not that difficult. If you have a will to do it, it can be done.
I guess there are those who would say the U.S. seems to let everybody in, whether we officially approve it or not, but we can save that argument for another time. I guess the question is, it is already too late, to try to get out. You mentioned, as I brought up a moment ago, about the passport restrictions and these tough new questions that are being asked. And I wonder, is that a Homeland Security function, or is there something else going on there? What your thoughts are?
Those are personal thoughts, and because this new passport application process that's impossible to fill out is relatively new, I'm going to pass on my personal opinion.
Okay.
I like to stick with as much fact as I possibly can. The fact of the matter is right now, I really do believe, and I think people will see this if they would go to the site, that people are playing Russian roulette. I mean, I'm not talking one bullet in a six-chamber and spinning the revolver and pointing the gun to your head. I think you got two bullets in the chamber right now. The worst thing that could ever happen to any human being, and I've thought about this in my near 60 years of life on this planet, is regret. I don't want any regrets, and especially when it comes to my wife and my two teenagers. I want to do what's right by them, and I think that everybody listening to my voice right now doesn't want to have regrets. They want to have options. They want to live. They want to live a high quality of life. And I think that they know there's something is going on in the world, and especially in this country, that just is.
All right, we need to go to a break. When we come back, we'll be opening up the phone lines just a little bit with Blake Sawyer. I'm George Knapp. This is Coast to Coast. My guest is Blake Sawyer, talking about escaping the USA, where you should go, what the reasons are for going, and what your chances of survival are once you get there. When we come back, we'll open up the phone lines and find out how exactly this should work for families that aren't rich. How do you afford to just pull up stakes and move your family to, say, Argentina, no matter how urgent the need might be? That and more right after this on Coast to Coast. Okay, Blake Sawyer, let's say our listeners sign up for your website service. They get your blogs. They settle on Ecuador, Argentina, Chile, some other place that's on your list for a variety of reasons. They want to move. Trouble is imminent. There's all kinds of real bad stuff going down the pike. For an average family, for somebody of normal means or less than normal means, that is a daunting task to be able to afford to move your family, sell all your possessions, decide what you're going to take with you, and then leave the country on the assumption that things are really going to get bad in a big hurry. And it also is under the assumption that you can do this and get out in time.
You hit on some really good points. I have no qualms with you asking that or saying that that's what you think is going to happen. But there's the other side of the coin, George. There are people that are looking for a better life now. Do you understand that? There are people looking for a better life now.
So even if it doesn't hit the fan,
they don't have to wait until the worst case scenarios or whatever is happening, or death is knocking on the door, like we did in Europe and the Nazis on the march. We could look at this as, why are the millions of people that are leaving every year leaving? They're leaving for a lot of different reasons. Some do see the handwriting on the wall, but other people are looking for a better way of life. And it's like we live on one planet. People have moved from L.A. to Chicago or from San Francisco to Miami. It's a move. There's a cost involved in moving, certainly. There's some paperwork that you have to get into to any country. They're just not going to let anybody in. But it's for a better way of life. And I don't know that I can describe the process because I've done it, but I will say this. Every single person that I've helped move has said it's one of the best things they've ever done because they have a higher quality of life. They found just immense amount of peace and tranquility and meaning in life by moving, and they feel good about it. And some people were I think they're pioneers. They're concerned about their families, still back in the United States, but more and more of those families are saying they're coming down to where they live, and they're seeing that it is a completely different way of life, and they're seeing the handwriting on the wall. There's a lot of variables there. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but what's the alternative? I think that our the Coast to Coast listeners, if they listen to Coast a lot, just as I said, Mark Dice alone this Thursday, do you want to live in a country where you are tracked and traced and you could lose it all right now? I mean, George, you could lose everything you've got right now because we live in the most litigious society in the world. Somebody could sue you, and I don't care how much insurance that you have, just you paying attorneys could bleed you dry. We live in a society in this country that you could lose it all 100 different ways.
Or if you get sick.
Yeah, well, the vast majority of bankruptcies, and bankruptcies have become more difficult because of laws that Congress have passed, but the vast majority, way over 50% of all bankruptcies, are due to medical bills, and those are with people with insurance, medical insurance, okay? So how would you like to live someplace where everything is healthy and organic and people live a longer life? The country that I moved to has a higher life expectancy, has a higher literacy rate than the United States, has just, percentages of the crime that the United States has. The people are real. Let me tell you about a libertarian society. And I don't want to get into politics because it's a tough subject, but I live in a society where I have my home. It's libertarian. That means I do whatever I want, and I don't bother anybody else, and they don't bother me. Okay, there's something very refreshing about living in a libertarian society, and I rate these the 200 countries in the world in these 100 categories. You could go to I'm going to give it out for the very first time, survivewithcoasttocoast.com, and you have an option. If you want this information, you can click on the first link. If not, you can put your first name and email address in there, and we'll get the information to you over the next week of what you can do. I think intelligent people are going to want this information, whether they use it today, next week, or next month, but there is a point in time they're going to go, I wish I had this information, because I've done 35 years of research, hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of miles, and when the doo-doo is hitting the fan, George, you know and I know nobody's going to have the time to put all this information together, where the safe havens are in the world to survive war, disease, famine, natural disasters, ruthless governments, a global catastrophe. I really do believe that the people that report back to me go, wow, because of the information. You said you barely kicked the tires on the website. There's 350 pages of information. Whatever people want to know, it's there.
Okay, we'll take some calls. East of the Rockies, Jane in Fort Myers, Florida. Fort Myers, pretty nice place, Jane. That's a pretty nice place.
Beautiful here, beautiful. I hope it stays this way.
You'd hate to leave there, right?
Yeah, I would. Well, good evening to both of you.
Good evening, Jane.
Shortly after George W. Bush left office, I remember hearing that he had bought 90-some thousand acres of land in Paraguay.
Right.
And it baffled me. And now I'm wondering if maybe the government is privy to some kind of information of what might happen. And they're all going to just, move down there and start their little governments down there or what?
Well, I've written about this. Reverend Sun Myung Yoon has also bought property in this particular area of Paraguay. Paraguay is a military dictatorship, okay? It is not a free society, all right? Now, there's a lot of connection with Bush. I've written about it in the blogs, and there's a lot of information about there. But you bring up a really valid point. All the major world globalists, Ted Turner, who says, population of the planet, no more than 500 million people. That means more than 9 out of 10 people on the planet has got to go, according to Ted Turner. He owns tons of land in the southern part of South America. George Soros, who can make one statement and ruin a country, ruin an economy. There's very few people as powerful as he is. He owns tons of land in this area as well, too, in southern South America. The vast majority of the globalists have safe havens in the safe havens. I write about this, and I tell you why they have it. They know what's going on. They know what's coming down. Now, Russia, the United States, and a few other countries have a lot of underground cities where they're going to take their political leaders when we have nuclear war or, let's say, Planet X, Nibiru, this brown star. I mean, there's a bajillion scenarios out there that are coming down the pike. They all have their sort of safe haven. But if the globals say 9 out of 10 people got to go, Jane, you're not on the list. Neither am I. And as famous as George Knapp is with his 14 Emmys and his Peabodys, et cetera, I don't know that George is on the list either.
I'm going to make some calls on that tomorrow, though. Jane makes an interesting point, though. She asks whether governments know. It could be that governments know. It could be that just some people within governments know that it's not widely shared.
I think that the people that I believe run the show, there's some in the United States government, but I think the vast majority of the people in the United States government are not aware. Now, I don't want to open up another can of worms, but the vast majority of my life has been in the health industry. I had an epiphany 35 years ago. I've lived in perfect health, no doctors, not even an aspirin in 35 years. And I put up a website and explained to people how they could bring their body to this perfect state. And I've had bajillions of people. I use bajillions a lot. That's my hyperbole. Bajillions of people healed and things like that. The government came to me and said, "You got to take this down 6 years ago. You cannot do this. You cannot tell people the truth." No complaints with the Better Business Bureau, no complaints of any kind, but they market their disinformation. They are going to protect the truth and not let it out. I believe that there are people, and I've talked to people because I've been able and privy to help people with their health in high government positions and different things. I know there are people that know what's going on and what's coming down. It's kind of hush-hush in certain circles, and in other circles, they're planning and preparing for this. But Fort Myers, Florida, it's on the coast. Look at the tsunamis that we've had. I tell you what, if we have a polar flip and the ice melts at both poles, if we have some major disasters in some ways, if the seas rise 20 feet, 1 billion people are going to be displaced. That's 1 out of every 7 people on the planet. There's some things that are going down, and they know the scenarios, and they're preparing for themselves. They're not preparing for you or me.
You mentioned your work in the health field, and I didn't really want to get into this, but you've done some work with Kevin Trudeau, right? And he's a pretty controversial guy. The government has said that he's a con man. They've tried to shut him down. Is that what you mean by when you were shut down, your site was shut down? Is some sort of association with Kevin?
No. Kevin was taking a product that I have. Invite me on your show, George, and we'll talk about it. But I have a product that, it's miraculous. It reverses the aging process. It repairs damage to the body. It's in 35 years of being involved in the health industry, I've never had anything like this. It's famous. I mean, the most famous movie stars take it. All the world's famous athletes take it.
Gotcha. But they came after you.
Yeah, and I had information on my website, and basically I had thousands of testimonies of people that were healed of all the incurable diseases you could possibly imagine, everything that you can possibly imagine. The government came to me. I mean, we're talking Washington, D.C. officials came to me and said, "You can't say this." And I said, "What about free speech?" And I said, "There is no such thing as free speech." On every page, 900-page website, 900 pages. I mean, my webmaster complained about this. 900 pages at the top of every single page. It says, "I, Blake Sawyer, do not heal. My protocol does not heal you." And I said, "Only God can heal you. He designed the human body. Only God heals." I felt like I covered everything, but they said, "You can't say that." And I said, "Why?" And they said, "Well, you can't say anything heals. God can't heal. Only drugs and doctors," and they gave me the whole entire spiel. And it is the law of the land, and I understand it. So I had to stop doing that. But no, Kevin Trudeau was taking this product, and he came to me, and he wanted to tell the world about it. And I said, the first few conversations I ever had with Kevin, I said, "Kevin, get away from me. Don't call me. Don't talk to me. Don't do. I mean, get away. I'm not fighting the government. I never want to fight the government. I don't have the balls that you've got, Kevin, and he's got balls. And then I'm not going to spend $100 million in attorney's bills, fighting the government. I don't like that sort of thing." But he wore me down, and he eventually it just had tremendous benefits from taking this particular product that I have the world control over. And so Kevin is Kevin. I mean, Kevin is an interesting guy. I like him a lot. He has a lot of truth. He tells.
I'm not passing judgment. I think he'd be a really interesting guest to have sometime. I know how the government feels about him and a lot of other folks, but I also know that millions of other people seem to like him a lot. Jane, thanks for that call. West of the Rockies, Sherry in Scottsdale, Arizona. Hi, Sherry.
Hi. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, Sherry.
I swear Coast to Coast outdoes himself every time. I am so glad that you are on tonight. Blake, I am really of the mindset that you are in. I've really been into healthy things, and I've done a lot of my own investigation. Sounds like I'm way behind you, but I believe that we are probably one of the least free countries in the world, and yet we're touted to be one of the most free. And I think just to keep us here so that they can support this government. Anyway, my question to you was, you were talking about some of the top. I had two questions for you, actually, if that would be okay.
Okay.
Sure.
Chile, you said, was one of the top safest. I understand that they have quite their president there is quite a leftist. Can you speak to that a little bit? And then my second question for you was, I did sign up on your site. I'm really excited to get your information. Can you explain the difference to me a little bit, and maybe to help others a little bit on, because I've been looking to get moved, on just going there to permanently move there, and isn't it easier if you would maybe transition as a retiree possibly? Is there any?
All right. Chile and the president. Let me tell you, I apologize to all the people that are listening. If you're in the right, conservative, Republican, or if you're left, Democrat, or whatever you say, I don't believe in the left-right paradigm. I actually believe they want everybody in a left-right paradigm. That means the left hates the right, and the right hates the left. And they keep everybody in this country busy hating each other and fighting each other and saying, we're right, no, you're wrong, we're right, this, that, and the other. And yet they're the ones that are about ready to pull the rug out from underneath everybody. We're all drinking fluoridated water. That's what Adolf Hitler used to keep all the people in the concentration camps docile. And so they just kind of walked like a zombie straight to their death. And whether it's the showers or whether in the beginning where they were shooting them in the head and then bulldozing them in those big, huge holes in the ground. I do not believe in the left-right paradigm. So this is what I believe in. I believe in freedom. And whether you're left or you're right, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, if you're black or white, rich or poor, if you're Catholic, Protestant, atheist, metaphysical, whatever it is, you would want to live in a libertarian society where nobody hates you. If you were in a left society, in our government, when the Republicans are in power, they have the IRS and everybody, go after the left people, the Democrats and the people that are the big donors. When the Democrats are in office, they use the same alphabet soup to go after the conservatives. And so, yes, there has been left and right politicians in all these countries in South America as well as South Africa. There's been extreme left and extreme right, and the same thing that's going on in Europe and various other places. I think you have to look at survival. That's what my website's about, surviving. And if you're in a libertarian society, and Chile is not that libertarian, Chile has some problems and issues with it. I mean, they have a lot of earthquakes, they have volcanoes, they have some issues and things that are natural disasters. Granted, I'm predicting only 10% of the people that die in the world will die of natural disasters, but that's still 10%. That's one bullet in a 10-chamber revolver playing Russian roulette. I think there's places that you have to look at totally. If you don't think there's going to be any earth changes, et cetera, that's not a problem. Your second question, retiring. Yes, I have immigration information on all the top countries, the survival countries, and what the immigration rules and regulations are. There are various different ways to get into some countries. Ecuador, by the way, is one of the easiest countries to get into right now. That's in my top 5. But there are countries that are more difficult. But it depends on your age. It depends on your finances. There's a lot of variables there.
Okay, you mentioned about Paraguay. I guess that some of the big shots have bought up a bunch of land there, even though it's a military dictatorship. I guess if you got friends who run the military dictatorship, that's probably a good place to be.
Bingo. bingo, George, very perceptive, and that information is on the website, which people can go to by going to survivewithcoasttocoast.com. We write about things, who you want to be, and Paraguay is a military dictatorship. Uruguay isn't, Argentina isn't, Chile isn't, Ecuador isn't, Brazil isn't. Most of the southern countries don't have military dictatorships, but Paraguay certainly is.
All right, Blake Sawyer is my guest. The lines are full. We'll get to as many of your calls as we can. Right after this, Marvin Gaye taking us into the break on Coast to Coast AM. Coming up at the top of the hour, I'll be joined by an author who's written a book about Black Herman, a great African-American magician and mentalist from 80 or so years ago. The author's name is George Patton. I think you're going to like that conversation. In the meantime, we've got the phone lines full with questions from my guest Blake Sawyer about escaping the USA. We'll get to as many of your questions as we can right after this on Coast to Coast AM. Back to the phone lines with your questions for Blake Sawyer. The lines are full, so folks, do me a favor and try to get right to the point on your questions. We're going to our first-time caller, Alejandra in Chicago. Good morning, Alejandra.
Yes, good morning. I'm calling from Chicago. I'm originally from Lima, Peru. I'm a dual citizen, U.S. and Peruvian.
Uh-huh.
In some areas, the standard of living in Lima, Peru is better than the U.S. Example, education, health, food, and quality of life. I had to come to the U.S. I have a postgraduate degree, and I have a executive job here in the U.S. But my question is twofold. Number one is, what is the best country in South America to live and why, according to your opinion? And second is, what is your forecast on economic development and employment and investment opportunities in Brazil and Argentina?
Okay. Wow. With so many people waiting, Alejandro, I'm going to try to do this really, really short. You're right. Most of all the countries in South America have a higher standard of living than the United States. Let me address something just real quick. In the United States, the vast majority of people are in debt up to their eyeballs. The country in which I live, and similar into Peru, people own their own homes. I mean, we're talking all of them. The country in which I live, less than 3% of all the homes in the whole entire country have a mortgage on them. That means when you buy a home, you pay cash for it. You pay cash for everything. The country that I live in South America, it's all cash. So all those people concerned about those economic, from a Christian standpoint of view, people would say mark of the beast or those tracking and tracing, RFID sort of things, that is not going to be the problem that it is going to be in most other countries in the world. The people don't have a concept except the United States if you've never left the United States. Here's a good example, Alejandra, that has actually lived and was raised in another country and been to the United States. Brazil, Argentina, all these countries have pros and cons. I can't take the time to get into all of them. They all have their different economic things, but I'll tell you what, I give charts, let's say an example for Argentina, and all the charts are going up, economically speaking, and the charts for the United States are all going down. The United States have almost twice the unemployment that Argentina has, okay, as an example. So the economic indicators are completely different. Most of these countries that are in our top 5, top 10, their economies are really moving forward. There's a lot of investment. When I bought my home, and I have a property that's like a miniature national park. I grow all my own food. I'm off the grid. I have my own water source. I mean, everything. When I bought my home 15 years ago, I was the only American in this particular area. Now there's like more than 50 Americans. Now there's more than 50 Europeans. There's a mass exodus out of the United States and Europe. I give the statistics. I give all the documentation. There's millions of people that are leaving, and they are going. Peru's in our top 15. They are going to these countries because you have a higher quality of life, just like Alejandro said.
And for those of you who are calling and emailing about wanting more information and wanting the list, I mean, he's given them. If you're listening, you've heard of the top 5: Argentina and Chile and Ecuador. So that's the area that he's concentrating on, and which he ranks highest of all. And if you are taking notes there, Skype, Michael in Los Angeles. How you doing, Michael?
Hi, I'm doing fine. How are you guys?
Okay.
Hey, the average person, I just don't see them being able to move. They're not going to have the money. They're not going to be able to work once they get down there. Can you own a gun in this new utopia to protect yourself? Personally, I don't really want to live in a sweatbox that's infested with mosquitoes either.
Okay. All good points.
And I would rather stay in America and fight. I love this country. I don't want to cut and run. And, if Soros is such a bad guy, why doesn't the CIA double tap him in the head like they did Osama bin Laden? And, I'll take my answers off the air. Thanks.
Good stuff, Michael. Good.
Okay. Michael is like a lot of people, but as I said, you're playing Russian roulette. You're no different than somebody in, Germany, Poland, or whatever, and you're trying to stick it out. If you want to try to stick it out, you can stick it out. But I am predicting 90% of the people living in this country today will be dead in the next 5 to 15 years. The globalists have said it. All the world's religions predict these sorts of things. It's all coming down, and if you want to stick it out and you want to fight for this country, you can. But, Michael, your relatives, your ancestors left the country of their birth and came to the United States to looking for a better life or fleeing certain death or destruction. You can't say that the people that are leaving the United States are not intelligent or they're not doing the right thing for themselves. It's not for everybody. But go ahead. You stick it out here and you see what happens.
The mention was made by Alejandro 2 callers ago there about the standard of living. He said in some parts of Peru it's higher. And you mentioned that you thought the standards of living in several countries are higher. I've only been to Brazil, and I saw Rio a couple of years ago. And, gosh, you got a lot of rich people, at least maybe 10 or 15%. And then it looks like 80% ghetto in Rio.
Absolutely. Well, Brazil has a different way of looking at life than our top 3 countries do. Brazil is in the top 5 for sure. But I think the information on the website will explain it to you why these countries are richer than Americans. This is the facade that we have here. You're in Vegas, George. Good grief. You know what's happened to the housing market there. 25% of every home in the United States, people owe more on it than what they could get if they sold it today. They don't own that home. The bank does. And the bank owns their cars, and because they're credit card debt, if they sold everything they had, they would end up with either negative or very, very little, maybe the clothes on their back. In these other countries, everybody owns their home. They own their car. If economic things happen, nothing changes. They grow their food in their backyard. They're self-sufficient. It's not going to be as devastating as the people here in this country that will have absolutely nothing when the economic doo-doo hits the fan.
I get that's a very good point. But going back to what earlier callers have said, is if 25% of the homes are homeowners are underwater and people are facing bankruptcy and foreclosures, which are so prevalent here in Nevada, how do they pull up stakes and move? They can't.
I've traveled the world over, and I've met guys that just grabbed a backpack, and they've been backpacking in different places of the world for 10 years. Where there's a will, there's a way. There have been hundreds of millions. That is not hyperbole. If I use hyperbole, I use bajillions. There have been hundreds of millions of people that have fled the country of their birth since the beginning of time. They have fled Pol Pot, Idi Amin, Stalin, Hitler. They have fled. Millions of people are fleeing the United States. Millions have already left. According to a Zogby poll, tens of millions are planning to leave shortly. They're already making plans. So certainly, if you don't think that you can do it, you can. But I have the information how to do it on the website. You can go to survivewithcoasttocoast.com, and you can look at the information. It's right there.
Okay. Wildcard line. Greg in New Jersey. Hi, Greg.
Yeah, hi. Just wanted to confirm some of the things Blake was saying. Anyone can Google Francis Fox Piven or Cloward and Piven. These are 2 socialists who are working with the DSA, the Democrat Socialists of America, to create chaos and bring down capitalism. They're out there today. If you look at a picture of when President Clinton signed the motor voter bill, standing behind him are none other than Cloward and Piven. Another thing I wanted to say to confirm Blake's explanation as to re-education camps, there's YouTube videos. An FBI agent infiltrated the weathermen associated with Obama's friend Bill Ayers when he headed up the weathermen and the SDS, the Students for a Democratic Society. And in this meeting, they openly discussed re-education camps being created down in Georgia upon the collapse and the chaos once they were able to collapse the economy. And they were going to send Americans to the re-education camp, and they were discussing what they were going to do to those who were unwilling to become re-educated. And they estimated they would have to murder 25 million Americans who would not succumb to their re-education. These are facts, and they're chilling, and people better wake up, because there are people in America who are plotting, people like George Soros, to collapse our country's economy and our civil society and our way of life. And although there are a lot of NRA members like myself who will stand up and fight along with our military, it may not be enough if there's total economic collapse. So, Blake, I do appreciate you standing up for your beliefs. I hope it doesn't come to that.
Neither do I, Greg. I really don't. But the handwriting's on the wall.
Open-minded. Blake, at least you're open-minded and you're not afraid to speak the truth of what you know. And there are so many ignorant Americans out there that are just sitting around like sheep, being led around by the mainstream media, and they better wake up. So thank you very much for your information.
You're welcome.
Any other comment on that, Blake?
Well, no. I think people have their perception of things. I am a truth seeker. I want all the information that I can possibly grab and put all these pieces of puzzle together, like I talked about the jigsaw puzzle. When you start putting the pieces of the puzzle together, you're going to see the handwriting on the wall in this country, and you're going to want at least an option. And I think that's what I give people. I give people information how and where to survive the collapse, whether it's nuclear war, whether it's disease and pandemics, whether it's famine, starvation, hyperinflation, economic disaster, ruthless governments, whether it's a fascist, right-wing, Hitler-type takeover or a communist, Stalinist takeover of this country or a military dictatorship, if it's natural disasters, global climate change, whatever, there's places that you can go that's going to survive. And statistically, the stats don't lie. But I've traveled these countries, I've investigated them, and what can I say? The people that have done it just tell me incredible information, life-saving information. The people that have actually left the country say it's the best thing they've ever done.
How many people have you personally helped to make this move?
That's proprietary information, George. I'm sorry, I won't give you that.
But that's some. You've done some of it. You've referred to it already.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's never a day that goes by that somebody isn't asking me to help them. But
Okay. Wildcard line. Tim in Wisconsin. Hi, Tim.
Hey, how you doing, George? How you doing, Blake, tonight?
Doing great,
okay.
Tim.
Oh, great. Glad you're on. What do you think about, like, the FEMA camps they're opening and everything like that? And also, where would be the best place for, like, health care, and how much would be the cost for, like, an average 3-bedroom house, say you want to move wherever you want to move down there?
Yeah, good questions. Very, very good questions, Tim. The FEMA camps, I mean, I'm not going to pick on the United States government per se, but I think that they're prepared. I mean, I think most people have seen the pictures of the millions of coffins they have ready, the body bags. I mean, they're preparing for something. And they create these laws in order to control more American people. I still believe the average American does not know that they're the frog in cold water and they think they're okay and they're now boiling. They're going to be dinner here shortly. It's boiling. They think they're in a hot tub in Vegas. They're not. The massive deception is there. As far as a home, 15 years ago, you could have bought a brand new 3-bedroom, 2-bath, really nice home for probably about $20,000 US where I live. Okay, I live in an expat area, very, very first world, high quality sort of area. But you just have no idea what it's like to buy tomatoes for 10 cents a pound and come back to the United States and buy them for $2 a pound. There's a lot of variables that are going on. Now, there's inflation. There's a lot of things that are changing economies and countries and stuff. But the quality of living and the cost of living I address big time on the website, so you can look at each individual country and what the cost of things are. Certainly, if you went to Switzerland, if you went to Norway, if you went to Italy, you're going to be paying more than you do in the United States. But there are countries that the cheapest viable countries, the best value for your money countries, I list all those. Okay? Thanks for your time, Tim.
Okay. Also, wildcard Bill in Illinois. Hi, Bill. Bill's gone. How about Ann in Seattle?
Hello?
Hi, Ann. How you doing?
Oh, hi. How you doing, you guys?
Okay,
great.
Better make it quick here. We only got a couple
Yeah.
minutes.
I don't think nowhere's going to be safe, when all this shit comes down. Nowhere's going to be safe. Sorry.
Oh, well, you're absolutely mistaken. Every place isn't going to be exactly the same. I have proven that, documented that on the website. You can go to it, survivewithcoasttocoast.com. You will see and you will read and you'll get the documentation. It's not going to be equal. It's not going to be equal everywhere. That is just fact. I'm absolutely 100% convinced of it.
Try to get one more call in. East of the Rockies, Michael in Tidewater, Virginia. Hi, Michael.
Hi. Yes, Mr. Sawyer, this country was founded by Protestants running away from Catholic countries. And in 1776, when they finally put it all together, they had a 10-to-1 majority over Catholics. 55 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Protestants. Today, we have half of our 300 million population as Protestants. You brought 50 people into the area where you live as Americans down in South America. You're talking to 10 million people tonight. There's 150 million Protestants who are still here who can turn this situation around. Lot ran to Sodom and Gomorrah to find safety because it seemed to be a better place. Jim Jones of the People's Temple cult ran to Jonestown, Guyana. You're not a Moses. You've got a book to sell. I'd like to take a look at it. I might even buy it. But I want to get you back on this program with Alex Jones, whom I challenged on his program tonight to debate me on Coast to Coast. I'll be talking to Tom Danheiser about setting that up with George Norrie and with George Knapp. And by the way, George Knapp gets the award for the bravest program in Coast to Coast history when he brought on a man that talked about tearing down the Reagan myth. That's where we have to start.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Any comment there, Blake?
Well, he said a mouthful.
Sure.
I'm not going to get into this Catholic Protestant thing. I like living in a libertarian where you can be a Protestant, a Catholic, a New Ager. You can believe in anything, and nobody's going to harm you. Nobody cares because they're libertarian. They're in a completely different mindset. And you think you're going to take back the country and with 140 million Protestants? I don't get it. But anyway, I wish you well, Michael.
If I had to do step one after getting the information from you, what is it? If let's say I'm a regular family, 2.2 kids, and I wanted to make this move, realistically, how even to start that? It just seems like such a daunting thing to do.
Yeah, I think that's a misnomer. I mean, have you ever gotten on a plane, George, and gone to L.A.? Of course you have. To New York, Toronto. Have you gone to the Caribbean? Have you gone to Hawaii? It's no different. You just go and take a week or two vacation, investigate. But I give the 1, 2, 3, the ABCs of what to do, of how to investigate the websites. I have hundreds of blogs, hundreds of websites, hundreds of bits of information about any particular country that you want. It's there on the website to investigate first. You do your due diligence and go, wow. This sounds like the country for me. And since most all the countries are very close together, unless you want to go to Australia or New Zealand or someplace else.
Okay. Blake, we're out of time there. Blake Sawyer, thanks very much. We have links on the website, and you're welcome to check them out. Coming back, we'll be speaking with George Patton, author of Blackjack, about Benjamin Black Herman Rucker, a magician and mentalist from long ago. Stay with us on Coast to Coast.